Next, I call on Deputy Eugene Murphy, who speaks on the withdrawal of banking services in Roscommon and East Galway. Deputy Murphy, you have 4 minutes.
And can I commence my statement in relation to the difficulties with rural banking in congratulating you, Cohorticus Minister. I know how much this means to you. I have no doubt you will be very capable in your job, and I wish you well. And hopefully the government will last a few years and you'll get an opportunity to shine in your role. Minister, the withdrawal of a number of services from small rural bank branches throughout the country, as you probably know yourself, is causing widespread anger, concern and frustration among business people and indeed particularly the elderly. And this is a huge problem in the constituency I represent of Roscommon, Galway. Now, Bank of Ireland have proposed to withdraw counter-staff and cash facilities from a number of rural branches across the country as part of a move to introduce an advise and self-service type of model. Recently, in fact yesterday in this House, I met with officials from Bank of Ireland, as did my constituency colleagues here in Leinster House. And unfortunately, the bank are not for turning on this issue, but I believe we have to shout stop in some form and fight back against this retrograde step. Small rural branches are under threat, and I will tell you now exactly where we have the problems at the moment. Dunmore in County Galway, Ballygar in County Galway, Elphin in County Roscommon, Strokestown in County Roscommon. The removal of counter-staff and cash facilities would only serve to place another major obstacle for businesses already struggling to survive and operate in rural Ireland. I am sure you know that from your own constituency. It is very important that the services continue. The banks are proposing that cash services will be available through a courier, but I have major security concerns about that proposal. Every time a business service is withdrawn, it is undermining the strength of small businesses to survive. Many rural businesses are already crippled with rising commercial rates, as well as an appalling broadband connectivity. And now they're going to have another obstacle in their way by the banking sector. It simply beggars belief. We should be encouraging and supporting small businesses in rural Ireland, not making them continually jump through hoops. Take, for example, the situation in Dunmore in County Galway. Business people there are up in arms, and rightly so. They are extremely fearful that the removal of cashier services will impact on the elderly and will result in that business will be taking people out of the region, and that's what will happen. For many rural towns like Dunmore, Elphin, Strokestown and Ballygar, the bank was a major focal point in the town, and it brought a lot of additional spin-off business to the regions. The withdrawal of a number of services in those rural branches will also severely impact on the elderly, many of whom may not be computer literate or have an online presence. There is a major push by the banking sector to basically reduce staff as part of a cost-cutting exercise and replace people with technology. There is a major emphasis on trying to move customers to an online presence with limited or no human interaction at branch level. And this is simply not going to work for everyone. Rural counties like Roscommon and Galway have a significantly higher percentage of older people, many of whom may not be computer literate, and they will be alienated by this latest move to withdraw services from rural bank branches. What are we going to have next? Will we have drive-through banks? When high-tech video banks with video tellers will be the only option, the only problem being they wouldn't work in Roscommon because we simply don't have the broadband connectivity. So I'm just putting this to you this evening. You're well aware of it yourself, and yes, I'll admit banks are there to make profit, but there is a situation that we need to address.
Thank you,
and I'm awaiting your reply with interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre, and thank you, Deputy Murphy, and thank you for your kind remarks. The Minister just couldn't be here. He was in Dublin Castle all day, and he was here for an earlier debate, so he just had to step out. But I'm happy to take it. And before I mention the remarks that are here, the issue that you highlight about diminution of services in rural areas is a real one. But I think you also acknowledged it in your own kind of opening comments that the state has, I believe, a 14% share in Bank of Ireland. So the idea that the state can tell Bank of Ireland which branches to keep open and closed doesn't arise. And you spoke about banking sector reducing costs, which is correct. The major onus for the last 8 years has been trying to have a functioning banking sector, and one indeed that is profitable and can stand on its own feet without the support necessarily of the taxpayer. At the outset, I should highlight that, notwithstanding the state's shareholding, the Minister has no direct functioning commercial decisions taken by these banks, including those which are part of the relationship between the banks and their customers. Decisions of this nature taken by the banks are matters for the boards of the banks and the management of those institutions. The Minister for Finance has responsibility to ensure that the banks are run on a commercial, cost-effective, regulated and independent basis to ensure the value of the banks as assets to the state. Accordingly, it would not be appropriate for the Minister to intervene in actions taken by the banks in matters of this nature. Relationship frameworks have been specified that define the nature of the relationship between the Minister and each of the banks. These frameworks are available on the website of the Department. Finally, I would add that in the case of Bank of Ireland, as I said, it's a 14% minority shareholding that the state has. Notwithstanding this, however, the officials from the Department have been provided with briefing material specifically in relation to, by Bank of Ireland, relating to developments in its branch network. The salient points are as follows. The bank's customers are rapidly changing the way in which they bank, and it's, I suppose, similar in terms of the post office network as well, but in this case it's banks, just as they are changing the way that they buy goods or services in being online and communicate with each other. Today, only 3% of Bank of Ireland's customers' total transactions are conducted over the counter. 97% take place through other channels. Every month, the bank has 8 million interactions with customers on their mobile app, with 14 million interactions per month through the mobile app, online banking and contact centres combined. In addition, the use of credit and debit cards and contactless banking continues to grow, with demand for cheques, foreign currency and coin services continuing to significantly reduce. The bank comments that when it looks at trends over time within a branch's catchment area and sees a consistent decrease in counter activity, it reconfigures the branch to support how customers are using it. That involves moving staff from behind the counter to directly onto the floor, where they can provide advice and assistance to customers, including in the use of self-service options. The bank advises that this change has been very successful in a growing number of the bank's branches, where it has seen an increase in transactions happening in the branch through the enhanced availability of self-service options. The bank has highlighted that in branches where staff move from behind the counter onto the floor, customers will continue to be provided with a comprehensive range of products and services, the ability to lodge and withdraw cash from easy-to-use self-service devices and access to online and phone services. The changes will also enable greater availability of branch staff to provide personalised financial and banking advice. Foreign currency exchange and coin transaction services will no longer be available in these branches. If customers still require a counter service, the bank will introduce them to the branch of their choice locally. Bank of Ireland has highlighted its retention of a strong nationwide branch presence of approximately 250 branches and 16 additional banking outlets. It maintains that it continues to improve its customer offerings and is investing 10 million in the branch network per year. It also maintains that it understands that business and retail customers increasingly require access to 24/7 facilities for lodgement and withdrawal. And can I take it that the rest of the response is read into the record?
A second response as well.
Okay. I'll let Deputy Murphy.
I'm happy with that. I know the Minister will endeavour to give an honest reply back to me. And look, I'm not surprised with the answer I have here this evening. And you are right, you know, in terms of the government's part ownership of the bank. It's small. You can't tell the bank what to do. But I think there's a bigger problem here, Minister, and I'm sure as a rural deputy you realise it. Like yourself, I presume you do constituency clinics, and I happened to be out last Monday, and I happened to be in the famous town of Glenamaddy, 4 roads to Glenamaddy. Now, they lost their bank some time back, and they are served by, most of them are served now by Bank of Ireland in Castlereagh. And they tell me they've got notice now that business lodgements can't be made over the counter after 12:30 on a Monday or whatever, which is inconvenient. Okay? Now, the bank will argue that all of this can be done through machine and that there will be a service there. And we can argue that back and forth. But I think, Minister, here is the important point. The community in Glenamaddy, great community, business people and community leaders, all make the point to me that the removal of a bank from your town, like Glenamaddy, like Ballygar, like Strokestown, like Elfane, the removal of a bank creates a huge difficulty for the local economy. And banks are needed. And I conclude with this. Maybe we have to start to get really serious about the post office and the credit union, so that in those areas. Now, the bank yesterday insisted to me we're not going to withdraw, and I have to say Bank of Ireland do some very good things like enterprising towns, and they encourage people to get involved, and I've been at, I'm sure like yourself, at many of these, and they're good. But my fear is the less customers are going in, you'll say to yourself 4 or 5 years down the road, what's the role for the bank? So I really think, as politicians, all of us have to get so serious about a banking system that we can put in to these towns and villages, many rural towns and villages, because I believe there's some good work going on and some money coming into communities, I acknowledge that, but we're going to lose out if we lose our bank services. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Talis Lodge.
So I just read the last paragraph into the record and respond directly. The bank has advised the implementation of any changes that take place on a phased basis in branches with a 2-month period for comprehensive customer notification. Bank of Ireland has commented that it is a dedicated team committed to supporting vulnerable and elderly customers, which is providing additional support in the use of our digital and self-service options. I acknowledge the point that you're making about rural Ireland in particular, and I mean, we can't really. I'm surprised at the response tonight, in that we got a response from a commercial institution for a topical issue debate here. There's a broader question about how we keep services in rural Ireland, whether it's credit unions or post offices. Many have closed, many are still open, thankfully, and I do think that and I hope and believe that government are looking actively at creating solutions in rural towns like the ones that you've mentioned. I mean, some of the towns, I would think, like Strokestown, maybe I'm wrong, do have perhaps other financial institutions in the town itself. But I know from my own part in Kilkenny, some of the middle-sized towns in the county would have had the traditional 2 main banks would have been there. And in most cases now, if it's one, that's as much as in those towns. But in some places there's no financial institution, and I think that's a broader problem that will be and has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.